Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today we're going to be talking about the one big question that every single NBA team has to answer at this point in the season. We're about 30 games in for most franchises, and we now know what teams are, and most importantly, what teams aren't. So we're going to talk about maybe some of the changes they have to make, how do they end up being successful, or if you're a tanking team, how do you get yourself to the bottom of the lottery? Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy, hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos, and let's go ahead and get right into it. Starting off with the Atlanta Hawks, we have what do they do with John Collins? Collins has been part of this team since he got drafted and became an integral part to their success, but this season, he's basically just been running around, averaging his lowest points per game since his rookie season. He's shooting 21.9% from three when he's supposed to be a stretch four, and really it just doesn't feel like he fits on this team very much anymore. That combined with the fact that he's got a pretty big contract over the next 2 seasons, and he seems like a prime trade candidate. So do you hold on to John Collins and hope he figures things out as potentially the perfect forward to put on this roster, or do you end up selling on him, trying to bring in a different piece that maybe fits this core of Trae Young and DeJounte Murray better? For the Celtics, my question is, will Robert Williams mess this thing up in the short term? Now, I think with Robert Williams coming back, the Celtics are easily going to be much better. He's a lob threat, a good passer as a big man. He can, provide some vertical spacing. He can also play some great defense. Robert Williams does basically everything the Celtics want and more, so when he comes back eventually, they're going to be a much better team. But in the short term, reintegrating a piece that important might cause them to lose some more games. We just saw them lose to the Orlando Magic last night. Not saying that's Robert Williams' fault, but we could see more games like that where you're looking at the Celtics and thinking they were so dominant, what happened to them? And it might just take some time to reintegrate a big piece like him. Once again, when I think they get to the playoffs, everything will be fine. But in the moment, maybe Robert Williams is going to cause some issues. So the Nets, my question is this thing for real? And you might be asking, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that they're 9-1 in their last 10 games. Kevin Durant is playing like an MVP candidate. Kyrie Irving is on fire. He just had a huge game winner against the Toronto Raptors. You've got all the pieces starting to fit together, and under Jacques Vaughn, they've got the second best record in the NBA since his hiring. So the question is, are the Nets for real? Are they truly becoming the contender that many people thought they could be, just looking at them on paper? Or will some of the dysfunction come back? They still have some major holes in the roster that really worry me. In particular, I think they need a better big man. I like Nick Claxton, but he's not exactly the best rebounder. I still think they need someone there and a rim protector, and we saw them get swept in the playoffs last year. Did they do enough to fix those issues, or is this just fool's gold? For the Charlotte Hornets, my question is, when are they going to blow this thing up? They've got Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward, and Kelly Oubre just off the top of my head as trade pieces that they could go ahead and deal to any number of franchises basically whenever they wanted to. They've also got PJ Washington, who I'm sure a lot of teams would like, and basically I feel like everybody's just waiting on the Hornets to blow this thing up. But in my opinion, it should come sooner than later because you need to stay as much as you can in this race for Victor Wembanyama. Now with Cade Cunningham being out for the Pistons all year, you have to try and keep pace with them, trade some of your pieces off, and just hope you can lose all the way to the bottom of the standings to get LaMelo Ball, that big name star like a Victor Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson. For the Bulls, the obvious question is Lonzo Ball ever going to come back? Before the season, it was assumed that he was going to play the whole year. Then as the start of the season rolled around, it was basically an unknown whether he was going to play at all. And now that has only gotten a bit more mysterious, with Woj saying a few days ago that he wouldn't be surprised if we don't see Lonzo Ball the entire season. And he's a big piece of why the Bulls were so successful last year for the first half of the year. He was so good, and he's such a good connector, a playmaker, defender, a shooter. He does everything for this Bulls roster, and without him, they look completely lost. But at this point, I'm not sure if he's even going to come back this year, and who knows when we'll see Lonzo play next. For the Cavaliers, my question is, how do they break into that upper echelon? Right now in the East, it is the Boston Celtics, the Milwaukee Bucks, and then basically everyone underneath them. But the Cavs are sitting right there at the 3 spot with a chance to maybe push up into those top 2 places if they can continue to win games. Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell are one of the best backcourts in the league. Evan Mobley has been great this season. Jared Allen still looks like a high-level rim protector, but really they have a hole at that 3 spot. They've got a couple of guys that can fill it here and there, but if they could somehow acquire a high-level 3-and-D player to put at the 3 and maybe upgrade the bench a bit, the Cavaliers could maybe make a run to the finals this year. For the Mavericks, the obvious question is, how do you get Luka Doncic some help? Luka has been phenomenal, easily one of the top 5 players in the league. A lot of people would argue top 3 or maybe even the best player in the NBA right now. But around him, he's just got a bunch of role players that are a bit inconsistent. He doesn't have like a true co-star because Christian Wood is coming off the bench and he hasn't really been exactly what the Mavs were looking for. So they need to go ahead and find some way to get Luka an all-star caliber player next to him, but they don't really have the assets to do so. They don't have a lot of intriguing young talent. Draft pick wise, they've got some, but There's not a lot of contracts that are super valuable to other teams. It just feels like right now they're kind of stuck in purgatory until they get Luka that second star, but I'm not exactly sure how they go about doing that. For the Denver Nuggets, my question is, how do you fix the defense? So far this season, they've been the 29th ranked defense, which is surprising because they still are towards the top of the Western Conference, but that's just because their offense is so good. You've got Nikola Jokic, who is one of the best offensive players we have seen in the history of the game. You've got Jamal Murray, who's been a bit hit or miss this year after coming off that major injury. Michael Porter Jr. has been solid when he's not missing time. But there's just no real defense being played for the Nuggets at the moment. They just gave up 1 billion points to the Los Angeles Lakers in a national TV loss, and they couldn't do anything to stop them. Even when Anthony Davis left the game early with injury, LeBron and Russell Westbrook were basically walking to the rim every time. I believe the Nuggets can be a true contender, but not until they fix that defense. For Detroit, I'm sure all Pistons fans are asking, when does the season end? Now that Cade Cunningham is out for the year, you've still got some fun pieces in Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey, and even Killian Hayes is playing some really good basketball, but not seeing Cade play, I'm sure takes a lot out of the year, and at this point, it feels like the Pistons are kind of just waiting till the draft to see where they end up picking, whether it's 1 through 5. For the Dubs, the question is, how do you survive without Steph Curry? And this is both referring to his injury, which is going to keep him out a couple of weeks. How do they still manage to win games? But also, when Steph's not on the court, how do you still be a productive team? I saw a graphic the other day that said that when Steph Curry is on the court for the Warriors, they're the best team in the league net rating wise. But when he's off the court, they're easily the worst team in the league net rating wise. So basically, they're living and dying by Steph Curry. And over these next 2 weeks, how many games are they realistically going to win without him? And even when he does come back, he might start a bit slow due to the injury. And when he does get back to full form, you still have to make some moves, or someone needs to step up to help Steph. Otherwise, the Warriors risk not just the chance of not repeating, but a chance of maybe not even making the playoffs. For the Houston Rockets, my question is, what do you do with Eric Gordon? Because he should have been moved years ago at this point. I'm still shocked they haven't traded him. There have been some rumors that maybe he'll be involved in like a Jay Crowder 3-teamer, but also that Houston is looking for a first-round pick for him, which he doesn't really have that value anymore unless it's like a late, like lottery protected or even like top 20 protected first-round pick. He's just kind of taking up room from some of the young guys on the Houston team. He doesn't really fit what they're trying to do anymore. I don't know why Eric Gordon hasn't been moved. I still think he can be productive for a contending squad, but I don't know if they're going to be willing to pay the price that Houston is asking. For the Pacers, my question is, do you chase the success? At the moment, they're still in the playoff picture for the Eastern Conference, and they've been really good. Tyrese Halliburton is one of the best rising point guards in the league. Buddy Hield is a knockdown shooter. Benedict Mathurin is right there in both the 6th Man of the Year and Rookie of the Year races. Miles Turner's having a career season at the moment. You've been getting such good play from so many different guys that there's a realistic chance they could not just be a play-in team, but maybe push for the playoffs eventually. So do you continue to ride this success, or do you go ahead and trade like a Miles Turner, who has more trade value than he ever has? Buddy Hield, you could go ahead and move him as well and eventually tank your way towards outside of the play-in. So maybe you add like a Victor Wembanyama next to Benedict Mathurin and Tyrese Halliburton to set yourself up as an Eastern Conference powerhouse for years to come. For the Clippers, my question is, how do you balance the load management? Kawhi Leonard, of course, has missed a ton of time this year trying to battle back from his injury. Paul George has missed a couple games due to load management as well. Some of their other stars. It's reached a point where the Clippers any night might have a full championship contending squad, or they might be putting out like G Leaguers. And yeah, you want to keep your guys healthy for the playoffs, but these regular season games are important too. You don't want to have to go into the playoffs and fight your way through the 3, the 2, and then the 1 seed in the Western Conference just to make it to either face like the Bucks or the Celtics. The Clippers need to find a way to both balance keeping these guys healthy, but also staying competitive in a Western Conference where basically any team 1 through 8 can win almost any series. For the Lakers, there's only one question on everyone's mind, and that's, what's the trade? Are you going to trade Russell Westbrook and those first-round picks to bring in some talent? Are you going to stick with the package of maybe like Kendrick Nunn, Patrick Beverley, and one of those picks? What are the moves that you make to improve this squad around LeBron and Anthony Davis? Because both of them are having really good years. AD is having his best season in a really long time. He just maybe suffered an injury, so hopefully he's okay. But LeBron still is a top 10 player, top 15 player in the league at the moment, despite being like 58 years old. Russell Westbrook has even been having a solid year off the bench if you want to hold on to him over the rest of the year. The question is just, what moves do you make? You cannot stay pat on the way that things are going, because this team is not going to make the playoffs as currently constructed, and maybe you don't become a contender with what moves you make, but ultimately you have to help LeBron and AD with the way that they've been playing. For the Grizzlies, my question is, do you go all in? They right now look like one of the best teams in the Western Conference and the NBA period. They just blew out the Milwaukee Bucks by like 40 points. They've been dominating squads left and right, and they haven't even had Jaren, Ja, and Desmond Bane all healthy for a single minute yet this season. They're so deep. They've got one of the best coaches in the NBA in Taylor Jenkins. This might be the year where you consolidate some of those younger pieces, go out and trade for a high-level star to put next to Ja, Desmond Bane, and Jaren to make a big four, and you go and try and make a run at not just the Western Conference, but at winning an NBA title. The Miami Heat, my question is, can Pat Riley work some magic? Right now, the Heat are not constructed as a contender. I don't think I have to tell you that. Jimmy Butler's great. Bam Adebayo's great. Tyler Hero has been shooting lights out at the moment. But this team's not going to win the Eastern Conference. They're not going to win the NBA Finals. They've got to make some moves to shore up both the depth and also that four spot where they just don't have a legit power forward on the entire roster. However, with the bad contracts they have and a lack of draft picks, I don't know how they improve this roster to become a contender again. It's going to rely a lot on Pat Riley working some huge magic for them to even become one of the top teams in the playoffs. For the Milwaukee Bucks, the question is, when will Chris Middleton get right? Since coming back from his injury, Chris hasn't been phenomenal. He's had some pretty good games, but also like last game against the Memphis Grizzlies, he was absolutely terrible. And it's going to take some time for a guy like him who is a rhythm shooter to get back to form after coming off a major injury. But also, you need him to kind of get back sooner than later, or you're going to start to slip in the Eastern Conference standings. When they get healthy, they will be one of, if not the best team in the Eastern Conference. But at the moment, Chris Middleton is just going to take more time to get back. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, the obvious question is, was the Rudy Gobert trade a major mistake? They're missing Karl-Anthony Towns, which has been a big blow to them. But even before that, they were just not looking very good. Cat and Gobert didn't seem like a great fit. Anthony Edwards was complaining about Gobert and just having two bigs clogging up the paint, not letting him maybe have the breakout season that a lot of us were looking for. And they gave up a ton of assets, and it's already looking like maybe a massive mistake in just the first season. I personally thought it was going to go a lot better to begin the year. It hasn't been the case, and with this injury, they continue to drop down the standings. There are big problems right now in Minnesota, and if this is a mistake, it's one of the biggest blunders in NBA history. For the New Orleans Pelicans, very similar to the Memphis Grizzlies, do you go all in? Because the Western Conference, as I mentioned, is wide open, despite there being great teams like the Memphis Grizzlies, but the Pelicans are right there in the race for the 1 seed, despite missing Brandon Ingram for extended periods of time. Zion Williamson has missed some games as well. CJ McCollum just came back from an illness. They haven't had all three of those guys on the court very often together. They're also incredibly deep, and they have some young pieces that if they wanted to trade them and bring in another high-level star, I really think they could do that. So is this the year where you go all in, say, hey, we've got Zion, Ingram, CJ McCollum, when everybody gets healthy, commit to this team, say that we think we can win the Western Conference, this is our year, and make that big trade, or you just stick with what has been giving you success so far? For the Knicks, my question is, do you trade Julius Randle? Before the season, it felt like a foregone conclusion that his time in New York was kind of running out. However, they're currently in the midst of a 6-game win streak. He's playing some phenomenal basketball. RJ Barrett's turning his season around. Jalen Brunson looks pretty good. And all of a sudden, this Knicks team looks like they could maybe be a playoff squad. So do you just stick this thing out, say, hey, let's continue on the road that we're on and just continue to see if we can rack up some wins? Or do you say, hey, let's not get too ahead of ourselves and still think about trading Julius Randle to an interested squad at some point down the line to get off of his big contract? For my OKC Thunder, the question is, how far can Gilgeous-Alexander really go? Right now, he's been a borderline top 10 player this season. He's averaging over 30 points per game on high-level efficiency. He can score in the mid-range, get to the basket with ease, playmake for others. And as the talent continues to get better around him and they continue to build some chemistry, he's only going to get better and things will get easier. So can he be a top 5 player? Can he be an MVP at some point down the line? I personally think so, and I think as time continues, more people will agree. For the Orlando Magic, my question is a play-in run possible for them? Right now, they're in the midst of a pretty solid win streak. They beat the Raptors multiple times. They beat the Hawks. They just beat the Boston Celtics. Paolo Banchero continues to look better and better. Markelle Fultz, since coming back, has been huge to orchestrate their offense. And it's starting to feel like, hey, maybe Orlando has a play-in run in them. Now, it might just be like a hot streak in the midst of what's going to overall be a pretty mediocre season, but right now Orlando is looking better and better and showing some of the promise that their young core has. For Philly, my question is, are the injuries finally over? They had a stretch where they had no James Harden, no Joel Embiid, and no Tyrese Maxey. They managed to win a few games here and there over that stretch, which was super important for them to maintain their spot in the Eastern Conference. And now that James Harden's back, you've got Joel Embiid back. They're in the midst of a 4-game win streak. Tyrese Maxey is supposed to be coming back sooner than later. And once you get those three going, they look like one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. However, is this the end of the injuries? We've seen James Harden go through a lot of stuff over the past few seasons, and he's averaging one of the highest minute per game totals in the entire league at the moment. Joel Embiid, they rely on him a lot, and his body has broken down on him a few times these past few years. So is the injury bug truly over, or are we in for another really rough stretch for Philly? For the Phoenix Suns, the question is, what is the big move that they make? As currently constructed, they still have major holes in their roster. They need more shot creation off the bench. They need a legit second option, and they have the opportunity to trade guys like DeAndre Ayton or Mikal Bridges if a superstar becomes available, but also maybe they could just add some bench pieces. This team right now just feels like they're in kind of a limbo. There needs to be a big move to truly shake things up, and hopefully it comes sooner than later. For the Blazers, my question is, can Damian Lillard make an MVP case? He's been phenomenal as of late, knocking down an immense amount of threes. He's putting up like 30 points per game, and the Blazers did just take a pretty brutal L to the Dallas Mavericks, but overall, since he's come back, they've been looking pretty good. They're still waiting on Gary Payton II to come back. Injuries have affected them here and there, and ultimately, the Blazers look like they could potentially be a playoff squad. So how far can they march in the standings in what is a very balanced West? And if Dame keeps playing like this, his name might enter some of those MVP talks. For the Sacramento Kings, they obviously have one question. Is this the year that the drought ends? They look really good so far this season. Offensively, they're there. They are one of the best offensive teams in the league. The defense is a bit hit or miss. It's, enough and serviceable to get them by in some of these W's. But overall, if they make maybe a smaller trade to impact some of that defense and they continue this offensive production, I think that this is the year that the Sacramento Kings finally break the playoff drought. For the Toronto Raptors, the question is, are they going to figure this thing out? They've got a lot of talent in theory with OG Anunoby, Fred VanVleet, Scotty Barnes, and Pascal Siakam, with theoretically a great coach in Nick Nurse, who has been getting some questions about his rotation and usage of certain players. But outside of Siakam and OG Anunoby, basically everybody's been pretty disappointing. Could they go ahead and trade Siakam while his value is high as an all-NBA caliber player and blow this thing up, or will they eventually turn things around? The question for the Utah Jazz is this thing sustainable? Right now, they're in the midst of a playoff race. Lauri Markkanen looks like an all-star caliber player. Mike Conley has looked good when he's played, although he's dealt with some injury. Jordan Clarkson's been amazing. And many people, me included, thought they were going to be towards the bottom of the conference, but that just has not been the case. They've been really, really solid. Now, they still could blow things up around the deadline, and honestly, I think that's what they might do. But if they continue to stay with it, maybe try and make a playoff push, my question is, will this thing actually last, or is it just going to, by the end of it, fall apart? And finally, for the Wizards, my question is, how long is this thing going to go on? They've got Bradley Beal under contract for a very long time. They just signed him to a supermax with a no trade clause, which is very rare in the NBA nowadays. Kyle Kuzma's looks solid, but he could be on the move. Kristaps looks like maybe he's an all-star caliber player again, and yet they're one of the worst teams in the Eastern Conference. I'm just begging them to blow this up at this point. Trade Kyle Kuzma, trade Kristaps Porzingis, trade Bradley Beal. Go ahead, tank towards the bottom of the conference. Just stop being consistently mediocre. And those are my questions for all 30 NBA teams. Let me know what the biggest question is for your favorite team, or the answer to your favorite team's question that I asked in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what y'all have to say. As always, please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.